Bonjour everyone, I am Anne-Lise Cailliez and welcome to Parlez-Vous CEO, where we ditch the corporate talk and get real about entrepreneurship. Each week, I chat with founders and CEOs who build businesses their way, through the failures, pivots, and breakthroughs. And they bring the fire. Plus, I'll drop some golden nuggets of wisdom from my own entrepreneurial journey. This is your space to grow, learn, and evolve with a true growth mindset. Remember, success isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. Now let's kick things off and get this party started. Hello, bonjour, bonjour, hello. Welcome to another episode of Parlez-Vous CEO. My name is Anne-Lise Cailliez and I am your host. For those who are just joining the podcast, we're Anne-Lise marketing partners and we specialize in helping female-led businesses scale their revenue. If you want to learn how to take your business to the next level, make sure to stick around. And if you're interested in a free growth consultation, just drop the word growth in our DMs. So we have a very special guest today, and I'm super pumped to have with me Jenny Beres today from LA. Jenny is a specialist in PR and has worked in influencer marketing, has started 2 businesses, and I'm looking forward to diving into your story and your background, Jenny. In your own words, could you tell our listeners who are hearing from you today, what's your story and what's your background?
Yes, Anne-Lise, thank you so much for having me on. I love your show, so I'm so appreciative that you are excited also to have this discussion. Hello, everybody. I am Jenny Beres. I'm the co-founder of Pink Shark PR, public relations agency in Los Angeles. We specialize with working with companies, founders, startups, executives who are in fintech, tech, a lot of AI, all across the board, a lot of deep tech companies. My personal mission is to help more female founders take the leap and start championing themselves in the media, to start doing more press, to start getting the word out there, to start using PR as a juggernaut tool in their marketing toolbox, so to speak. So we have had Pink Shark officially since 2018. It's been a little bit older than that, but I was telling Anne-Lise before the call, I was a little bit hesitant to have a PR agency. My first company, I worked directly with founders, directly with executives, doing copywriting, content, branched into PR and influencer marketing, but every time, if I had $1 for every time somebody said, oh, I hate my PR agency, or I don't like my agency, or just showed some sort of disappointment. So my co-founder, she was like, we have to, we're doing this work, and we're not saying what we are. And I said, oh, I don't want an agency for this reason. And she said, well, just because you have an agency, doesn't mean you have to do it the way that other people are doing it. Doesn't mean that, people are going to automatically hate your guts. And she said, well, what are you doing right now? And I said, oh, I'm booking so-and-so for Forbes. And she was at the airport and she had enough of me. And she said, okay, that's it. It's a PR agency. And she was sitting next to this guy and he was wearing a pink shirt and it had great whites on it. And she said, oh my God, we're Pink Shark PR. That's destiny. That's who we are. And we've been Pink Shark PR ever since.
Oh, that's awesome. I love this story. And I love that you were fortunate to find a co-founder, because it's not always easy to find a co-founder that you align with. Could you share with your audience, so you're on a specific mission, right? To elevate women and make sure that in their marketing mix, they're using more PR. Could you share why you think women tend to maybe do less PR and why you're focusing on that niche?
Sure. So I love that question because I'll flip it in reverse. So I have never had an issue with the men that I work with, because we do work with men as well. We have plenty of wonderful, male leaders that are clients as well. But the difference in how they approach PR is stark. So for example, men have no problem telling you why they're amazing. If you ask, and they start from the beginning, what their mom said about them when they were small, what their teacher said about them when they were small. It's like they collect decades worth of even the most minuscule accolades and then just share it with the world, and no problem. And it gets them places. People do listen. Women, on the other hand, because we tend to be more reserved, we tend to be harder on ourselves. Dare I say, we're a little bit more thoughtful in how we, put together our messaging, because we are perceived harder, does challenges us more and criticizes us more. We tend to go in the opposite direction. we may have like the best, most baller resume ever, and we think it's crap. Like we think there's like nothing of value on there. And so it's amazing how many times that I will, before I'm bringing on a new client, and I'll say, okay, well, what's your story? And they're like, oh, it's nothing special, or it's whatever. And then I look at the resume and it's killer. I mean, it's unreal, and they don't think it's anything. So it really is this mindset, and obviously society has had a lot to do with how we present ourselves. But it's really just, we tend to not think that we're as amazing as we are. And men tend to think they're a little bit more amazing than they are. And we need to take a page from their book.
Share this experience as well. I have a marketing agency, and a couple of years ago, I pivoted to helping female-led businesses. And this is definitely something I had not necessarily thought about, would be the mindset working with women and the fear of visibility as well. So I'm sure you can tell us a bit more about that, because you used to be a coach for entrepreneur and artists. Could you tell us how you think maybe your background being a coach is probably also helping you with your PR clients today, specifically with that demographic?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because I think that if you are, and I'm sure you know this from your experience too, if you are a leader that works with clients, then you're automatically a coach. Your people skills and the way that you navigate people's insecurities, and it almost feels like I'm their attorney at sometimes, because you become like this confidant, and you start to learn about, okay, why don't they want to share? And so I think that if you're a business owner, you are a coach, even if that is not in your job description, especially if you are client facing, but even not. I mean, your team does look up to you. It is never in a company, it's never just do what I say. It will always be do what I do. I tell this to founders of mine that I feel like are overworking. I find that a lot of times I'll have founders that are overworking, but then they will be upset that they don't feel like their team is productive or prioritizing rest or asking for their PTO or whatever that is. And it's a no-brainer. They don't feel like they can, because the founder is the one setting the tone. So I think that you in this space, even though I'm not, I come from that world, being an agency owner who works with clients, I'm constantly coaching people through their fears of visibility. Rejection is a big one. And I have to tell you, I was not prepared when I started working in PR that it really does evoke the feeling of rejection in people. When Forbes says to you, no, not right now, or Forbes doesn't write back to you, it's not personal. It's either the story really isn't that newsworthy, meaning other than you and your organization, nobody else really cares, or it doesn't have that big of a societal impact. Or a lot of times the media is just right time, right place, and sometimes your story is just not the right time, right place for something. But I was not prepared how many people would really take that personally, both men and women. It's men take it a little harder and a little bit more aggressively. I had one client one time that said that TechCrunch had said, no, we're not going to cover this right now. And this person was so upset, took it so personally. They said, well, I'm never, ever going to share this story then with TechCrunch. And I said, well, I think that's okay then, because they don't want it. We'll find something else. They tend to kind of shrink back. And, men, again, will make it what's wrong with them that they don't want to cover me. Women make it what's wrong with me that they don't want to cover. So the visibility issues definitely play for both, male founders and female founders, but women make it more about themselves, like they're internally flawed and that's something they need to fix, when it's really not personal. It's just beef up your story, stay in contact, do a better job tracking news cycles, and keep going, because eventually, the right time does hit.
And as you're saying, it is not personal. It's not about you. It's not about your company. Do you feel that you are meeting sometimes some clients that don't even want to start doing PR because they think what's happening with their company or their own store is not newsworthy? So
Yes.
they don't even take the chance because they're like, it's not going to go through. It's not going to work out. So they don't even start.
I have that a lot. I have so many times where I will sit down with a founder who really knows that they need to be working on PR. And I always say, you have to take control of your public narrative, because if you don't take control of the narrative, the internet takes control of the narrative. And it's at best sloppy, at worst critical, And so you have to take the helm. And founders do eventually get to the point where they realize that. And then they come to me and they say, well, I'm boring. Like I'm boring. I don't have an interesting story. Now I work with some founders that really have like, very on paper, you could just see right away, they are either they're immigrants or they've done something really cool and disrupted in a space that, is not easy to disrupt, et cetera, et cetera. But the truth is, everybody has an interesting story. It's just sometimes you have to dig a little bit for it. It's not as, sometimes if it doesn't look like someone else's story, they think they're boring. But I hear that all the time. I have to do this for my company. My investors, my co-founder, my executives, they want me to do this, but I don't know what to say. And so then I always say, tell me, where were you challenged the most? Where was your life and your journey to this point so painful that now you can actually laugh about it?
Mm-hmm.
Where can you actually find humor in your struggle? And that is where we will find the story. And as long as you have a pulse and you're moving forward, you have a story. And it's just fear that keeps you from thinking that you don't.
Do you feel that sometimes, especially as entrepreneurs or founders, are scared to show vulnerability in their struggles? And that's why they can be a bit resistant or unsure about doing this PR exercise because maybe they're embarrassed about their struggles, or maybe they don't really want to show that the shadow side of, of themselves. So they're hesitant. Does that come up?
Sure. Yeah, it does. And I think that my job in those moments then is to remind people that vulnerability is power. Nobody wants a cookie cutter picture perfect story is not a story. It's not interesting. It's just not. Imagine if we went to the movies and there was no conflict, no dark night of the soul, no low point, even movies like Elf, even like, Will Ferrell's character, Buddy the Elf, like he was teetering on the bridge for a minute. Like every good story has conflict and despair and a low point and turning that low point around. And so I think if you can separate that, it's not a failure. It's a strength and it's good storytelling, then I think that becomes easier. I will say that it's easier, though, to talk about challenges that you've already overcome, as opposed to talking about challenges you are in the middle of. You do not have the bandwidth, you don't have the space, you haven't solved the issue. So I always tell my clients, let's not discuss the issues that you have not solved, but let's talk about what you have overcome. And then that's just good storytelling without compromising, how they appear, because PR is appearance. It is, like I said, shaping the public narrative, shaping the way people perceive you. But if it's something you've already surmounted, you're in the clear.
And to that point, because this is something that I'm really curious about, there is beauty in the middle, right? In the messy part of building a business. And I feel that people don't really want to talk about that. As you're mentioning, they want to talk about it when they overcame the challenge, when they're after the big hurdle. But don't you think that it could also be beneficial to other founders, other entrepreneurs, if people spoke more of the bit dirty middle, where it's not glamorous, where it's really hard, where you haven't overcome. So maybe you've learned the lessons, but you're still in the nitty gritty of the business, and it's not pretty, and it's okay. So maybe that would help normalize. And it's not glamorous, and it's not, maybe it's not a sexy story, but it's real, right?
Sure.
It's authentic.
Sure. And I agree with you 100%. I think just in the messy middle, you have to use discernment. And I think the messy middle means different things to different people. I think what you're saying, absolutely, like sharing those real, raw, stories. I mean, I remember a few years ago, I think it was Inc. that put out an article about all the founders who had struggled with mental health issues and all the founders who had struggled contemplating, harming themselves in some way. And then they only talked about that after their businesses took off. I think that founders and business owners, we do have to show up in the messy middle to support each other's mental health, because it is something that your therapists don't understand, your family members don't understand, friends who are not entrepreneurs don't understand. But I think when sharing that messy middle, you do just want to have discernment, as in there's a difference between sharing your story and there's a difference between working something out in therapy. And I think as long as you're not crossing that boundary by using your audience or your customer base as your therapist, and you're showing you've refined that message a little bit so that it's informative, it's helpful, it's authentic, but it's not public dumping or doing anything
Mm,
that would jeopardize how your customers feel or how your if you have investors, how your investors feel. Those are all real
mm,
world things that you have to keep in mind. So I think just having discernment in the messy middle and asking yourself, if I'm am I sharing this story from a place of strength and from a place of wanting to be authentic and connect, or am I still very raw about all of this, and am I on this podcast dumping how I feel? I really should be, scheduling a session with my therapist. And I think that's kind of the fine line to walk.
that's interesting. I think that's a good way to put it. Not using your social media or your channel to just dump all your emotion with no filter, but thinking how can I share and be authentic and share my struggle, but in a way that's also somehow helpful to others. And that I think is a difficult exercise.
Yes, it is. But the better you get at it, the better you get at two things: telling your story in a way that enhances your brand, it connects with your clients and customers, and also processing your own journey. And so I think that it is definitely difficult because I think that we are impulsive I think humans kind of run a gamut. We either tend to overshare when we're anxious or stressed or upset or need connection, and oversharing is never the answer. Or there's the other set of us that squash things down, pretend everything's fine until our lives hit total rock bottom. Neither of those are the answer. So I think that while it is a tricky exercise, it is definitely worthwhile because it will benefit the whole surface of your life. It will benefit.
And hence the importance of having an ally like you, for instance, who can help someone navigate exactly like, oh, you're a little bit like oversharing, or we're
Mhm.
being not vulnerable here, it's uninteresting. So I think the importance of having a partner who can help you best represent yourself, especially if it's a new exercise, if going online and starting branding yourself is a new exercise.
Yes.
So, what is the thing that you love the most about PR? Why did you pick that career?
So I think that I've always been a storyteller. I have a background as a playwright and a screenwriter. I think that stories are so powerful. They're the most powerful engine that moves the needle. And I think, in marketing, you don't have anything if you don't have a good story, if you don't have something that connects you to the audience. And every little thing that you do in marketing is a story. From the simple social media content to a simple tagline to a reel, it's all a mini story. But what I love the most is that earned media, and that's the area that I work in. I don't work in paid advertising or sponsored posts or anything like that, just true blue organic media. And I work every day with journalists and reporters. And I think it's very important to understand the value of earned media. You have to understand that you are working with journalists who they're not partners of my firm. They're not partners of, the company. They run by a set of journalistic ethics. They're doing their own job. They're telling an objective, honest story, which I think in this day and age is more important than ever. And they chose you. They chose your story. You didn't pay for it. Journalists are brilliant, but they are no fluff people. They do not suffer fools lightly. They cut right down to the brass tacks of a story. They're not interested in fluffing up your ego or helping your company succeed. They are there to tell the public a story because their job is to serve the public. And then they choose you or they choose my client and they tell a beautiful story because it was completely won on merit. And when a customer or a client sees that story and they see that it was written by so and so at the New York Times or so and so at the LA Times, and it's not an ad and it's not bought and paid for and it has no strings attached, the credibility and the visibility that coincides with that story is unmatched. You can't buy it in ads. You can't buy it in a sponsored post. You can't pay an influencer for that kind of credibility. And so it's a tough gig. It's a tough gig and you have to get really honest with yourself. But my favorite part is when it works. And when it works, there is nothing that will touch the coverage that you've gotten.
Hmm. I love that. when would you say for a business is the best time to hire a PR specialist or a PR firm? Is it the number of years they've been in business? Is it when there is a launch? Is it when they're starting to think about building authority for their own brand? What is an ideal who is an ideal client and where are they in their business?
Sure. So I think that there are ideal clients at every stage. So for example, my firm has worked with early stage startups to, kind of in between that past Series A to Series C, kind of middle ground enterprise, to then established companies that have been around a long time. So either established or Series D and later. I think that it is never too early to start PR. And the reason why is exactly what I said earlier. You must take control of the public narrative before the public and the internet takes control of your narrative for you. I have a lot of people that have said, oh, well, we get good customer reviews. Customer reviews are a terrible PR strategy. You can highlight good customer reviews within a PR strategy. But we all know, if you've ever worked with a client or a customer or served the public, whether you have a marketing agency or you've been a server at a restaurant, the public is fickle. People are fickle. What they feel one day, depending how their circumstances change, they could feel totally different the next day. Your brand narrative should not be at the whim of how the customers feel on any given day. So I always say start your PR as soon as possible. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that you have the funds for a PR agency right out of the gate, but that doesn't mean that you can't have an intern or you can't have a writer on your team. I think that writers make great PR people who can send out a few emails to reporters, who can start building some traction. I think before you have a product launch, before you have like a big announcement, you already should have laid the foundation of who you are and why they should care. In your community, if you're a startup or you are a small business and you're like, okay, the weight of the expense of having a PR agency right now, it doesn't make sense. Get out in the community and meet people, meet other business owners, send emails, engage on social media with reporters for the sake of just appreciating their work, introduce who you are. If you can build that kind of community, both locally and nationally for your brand, you're going to have an easier time. Not saying that the coverage is guaranteed because, again, journalism ethics, they are going to pick what they feel is important to write about, but you'll have a much easier time having them look at whatever you're doing and consider covering whatever you're doing. I would say once you are at a certain, if you are at a stable revenue, and it's not, your revenue isn't fluctuating. So I would say this for like if you're a funded startup or you're headed toward that Series A, yes, you could look into bringing an agency, but I definitely don't think people should wait to do PR until they have the funds for an agency. PR is your lifeline to the public. PR is the way you communicate with the public. And every company, if you rely on customers keeping you in business, should be working on that lifeline to the public the minute you open the doors.
And so for the people who are listening to us today and who are thinking about hiring a PR agency, what are your recommendations on how to pick the right PR agency for you and the pitfalls to avoid?
Sure. I think that's a great question. Obviously, this was something that I was so freaked out about in the beginning, was making sure that, we were an agency that really understood our clientele, really understood what they wanted. I would say that it's important in this day and age to find a PR agency that is not cookie cutter, that is very flexible in the way that they do things. For example, our clients tend to really like us because we are also founders. We don't understand just the discipline of PR, but we understand the stress, the pacing, the hustle, for better or worse, the anxiety of what goes into being a founder, running your own thing, having the whole thing fall on your shoulders. So we're PR people who operate like founders. Now, for my fintech clients, I learned it backwards. I learned everything about tech and fintech before I went off into PR. I learned a lot about tech. I learned a lot about the industries before I really went full force into bringing my comm skills into that. If you can find somebody who really understands, what you're doing. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be the only thing they're doing, because a good communication strategy is a good communication strategy. But if you can find somebody who is also really passionate about the industry that you're in, that really understands some of the nuances and can do it in a way that's innovative, very flexible, doesn't get caught up. A lot of comms people can be very caught up, and this is the way we do things, and it doesn't fly so much in 2025. So I would say flexibility and a passion, or at least pure enthusiasm for what you're doing, will really, really help you out.
And that's very helpful advice on how to pick the right partner, because it's really a new ally, right? So
It is.
super important.
It
And
is.
Jenny, what's been your biggest challenge in building the business with your co-founder, and how did you overcome it?
I think that's a beautiful question. We had a period of time where, so I like to be very, very hands on with clients. A lot of people, they can't wait to build something and pass clients off to somebody else. I think that sometimes, I don't think that everybody's meant to work with clients. I think that some people are meant to work behind the scenes and support the people who work with clients. And some people are meant to work face to face with clients. I have a big emotional capacity for working with people. Don't get upset. I'm not very reactive. I understand where people are coming from. I don't operate like that from that fearful place of what if they don't, if I say the wrong thing, or what if I tell this client no, or are they going to dump me? None of that. I really like to manage the people. And in the beginning, because everybody who's built an agency will tell you the owners need to get out of the day-to-day client work, and they need to get out of the day-to-day operations, and they need to pass it off to everyone else. That was a real struggle for me. I felt incredibly disconnected from my clients because I do all the sales at Pink Shark. So I would bring on companies, and I love the work. I love PR. It's my, I love communications. It's my passion. And so then I would bring on companies, and I'd be so excited to work with them and tell their story. And then I was removed from the process because I was told, as a business owner, I got to get out of the day to day. And so what happened was, with that, you hire people, and on hiring, I mean, we could do a whole episode on hiring. I mean, hiring is its own mountain to climb, but you hire people and, they may have other skill sets, or they feel differently about PR. And at the baseline, I am the founder, I'm the co-founder. No one's going to think about it necessarily the way I do because it's mine, and they shouldn't have to. But I felt very disconnected from the work. And when you feel disconnected from the work, you are disconnected a little bit from how you're hiring or what you're doing, or how, you're just not there. You're not present in the same way. So one of the adjustments that I had to make, that my co-founder and I had to make, was to go against the grain, which was the team operates better, we operate better, the clients are happier when I get to be the little micromanager that I want. And I don't mean that I ride everybody. That's not what I mean. But when I can have my eyes on things, and when I can be present with the client, and they still feel like they can reach out to me, and they still feel like they can run ideas, everybody in the company is happier. And that was definitely a challenge of doing things the way everyone says you're supposed to do them versus doing it the way I wanted to. It didn't work for me to remove myself completely from the day-to-day operations and just focus on growing the business. If I wasn't connected to the work, then I didn't connect. It was just a complete disconnect. So for me, it was find the balance between getting to do the work that you love. The whole reason you started this was so I could work with clients, and then figure out how to balance that with the other founder duties, growing the business, marketing, et cetera, et cetera. And so for me, the opposite advice worked best. So I would tell anybody, if you have a big challenge in your business, where are you building your business in the way that people are saying you should, versus how would you be building this business if you could just do it the way you wanted and not listen to the advice? And I'm not much of an advice taker, but in that period of my life, I was listening a little bit more outside of myself. And as soon as I said, to hell with that, it all clicked back into place.
This is very insightful and very helpful, I'm sure, to a lot of entrepreneurs, because it is a struggle and a challenge to find that balance between client acquisition as the founder and working on meeting new people, closing new deals, because without sales, you don't have a business. But
Right.
if you're interested in, at the end of the day, if you started and you wanted your own business because you like implementation, you like, for instance, the PR work, or I like the marketing strategy as well and implementation, it's what brings you joy. It's finding the right balance, right, with growing the business and still like being hands-on with clients and running the business. So I think it's a great insight what you just shared.
Sorry, not to interrupt you, but I think it's really important to add client retention is sales. And I think that if all of us in our discipline, because PR is marketing, if all of us in our discipline slowed down and realized that when we're doing really good work for our clients, we are retaining them. And obviously, sometimes things happen and it's out of our control. But our good work is also sales. I'm a big salesperson. I've loved sales since I was little. I've closed, there's not a dollar that has passed through Pink Shark that I have not personally brought in and shook hands on. I love it. I love sales. But I also have learned that sales is just not acquisition. Sales is a really happy client roster that you retain for years. I mean, we have clients on our roster that we have had for years. And that is a type of sales that is bar none. So I think for the business owners who feel guilty that, I shouldn't be spending time on the client work. Because I always hear everyone can't wait to offboard the client work. But what if we did the client work better? And we did it more systematically and we did it more efficiently, but we did really, really great freaking work. That is sales. You are holding on to that client for potentially years.
Absolutely. And I agree with you because I think lead generation is only 50% of the work. And then
Yes.
lead nurturing and implementation is so important. Relationships, like anything else, relationships are so important. And Jenny, I'm curious, who are the most influential or influencers or mentors that you're looking up to?
That is really interesting. So I'm not on social media a whole lot. I tend to get my inspiration from a variety of very strange places. I'm a big history buff. I love to read biographies. When my business was first taking off and I was going through some of those challenges that I explained, that especially since Pink Shark, we were very, very young at the pandemic, and our clients were struggling and it was very tough. I was very into reading about Winston Churchill. I was very into reading about, Queen Elizabeth at the time. I go on really weird historical benders. And I wouldn't say that, I went on like a 5-book tear about the Tudors. I wouldn't say that, Henry VIII is inspirational to me. I'm not going to say that. But I find nuggets from periods in history that I tend to be able to compare to business ownership on a larger scale. So it really just depends, but I do find a lot of my inspiration from history and biographies.
I love that. And if you had to give a piece of advice to someone who is just starting out in your field, what would you share with them?
So right now, a lot of PR people are complaining, and rightfully so. The job market is very wonky. It's very, very wonky. A lot of people are struggling to find jobs in communications. There are a lot of people who are on the fence about their own business. They're like, well, I'll take on freelance clients or I'll do whatever. And I started by freelancing back when I was like, in my mid-20s. I've never had a real job. I've only ever worked for myself. I've waited tables and I've worked for myself. And that's it. Go all in. So don't wait for someone else to give you a job. Don't wait for somebody else to tell you what to do. If you are wanting to work in comms, go do it. You look, there's a potential client. Whether your interest is tech, whether your interest is AI, whether your interest is in travel and lifestyle, whether your interest is in beauty, we are in no shortage of clients. Be flexible, be assertive, ask people for their business, show them what they could do. If you're not utilizing LinkedIn, get your butt on there every single day and connect with people. But whatever you decide to do, go all in. And for the people who go all in and don't stop, you will make it. You will make it. It may be rocky at times. You may question yourself. You may have to get very creative sometimes on how you stay afloat, but keep going, go all in, and you will make it. It's pretty much it's the casino that you're guaranteed to win at as long as you keep going.
I love that. I love that analogy. And Jenny, so you love sales and you're very good at it. What's your advice for a founder who is looking to grow their sales? Like, what do you think makes you so good at sales?
So I never think about, how when people get nervous that they're like, I'm going to talk to this person or I'm going to try to sell this person. I don't ever think about it that way. I am a natural enthusiast and I feel like I can find my way into almost any topic and find what's interesting about it, what's cool about it, and I can really engage with the person. The people who are the most interesting in life are the people who are the most interested. And if you are that kind of person and you are on, example, like LinkedIn, that's where my ideal client lives. So I'm on LinkedIn. If you are being interesting and interested on LinkedIn, if you're sharing your knowledge, if you're helping people out, if you're just connecting, you will find that those sales naturally evolve. When someone's interested in working with you, don't go straight for the sales pitch. Don't go straight for the jugular. They know exactly why you're there. They know what you're doing. Get to know them. I think that a lot of times salespeople make the conversation all about them. As a copywriter, I spot that all the time, like on websites. I can look at your website and tell you exactly why it's not working, why it's not converting. And 90% of the time, it's because that copy is about you and not about the other person. If you notice, it'll say like, we are an award-winning blah, blah, blah. We've won this many awards. We've been in business X, Y, and Z. They don't care. What are you doing for them? And so I think that if you can get out of kind of this, it's unintentional, but it's real self-absorbed. If you can get out of this unintentional self-absorbed sphere where all you're thinking about is yourself, your business, making the sale, whatever it is, you'll find that sales go a lot easier.
So sales is really like remembering in sales calls that it's about them, it's not about you.
Exactly. And ironically, PR is the same thing. I tell my clients this all the time, that if you really want your PR to take off, you got to make the PR and you got to make the message that you're conveying about the audience, not about you. PR, the more unselfish your PR is, the more coverage you're going to get.
That's really also a great piece of wisdom about PR. And Jenny, so what's next for you and your business that you're excited about?
So right now we are developing, I have a monthly, we're probably going to make it bi-monthly since we're getting a really good response, but I have a monthly Substack newsletter that we've converted into a podcast called FinTech and Friends. So we do have some FinTech guests, but the friends part is for kind of everybody in between. So a lot of founders, female founders, people working in other areas of marketing and tech. So we're really working on developing the FinTech and Friends community. And just using that as a platform to help propel female businesses forward, to help encourage more women to, obviously get visible, do the PR, and trying to really fortify that community so that it's not just the same typical type of founder that you see. We're really trying to highlight different founders, female founders, people of color, immigrants, like people who are not your typical founder or investor-backed founder, or the people who have been on the sidelines. And so we're really highlighting those stories right now.
Oh, I love that. That's music to my ears. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
And Jenny, how can our listeners connect with you and learn more about what you do?
Oh, that's great. So the proper website is pinksharkpr.com, but I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if you say hello, if you send me a message, I will see it pretty much right away. So LinkedIn is, if you want to strike up a conversation, LinkedIn is the best way to connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny, for being our guest today on Parlez-Vous CEO. It was a pleasure hearing about what you're doing, and I love your mission, and I'm your ally. I love it.
Thank you so much, Anne-Lise, for having me. I appreciate the connection. I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you too.
Thank you so much. And that wraps up today's episode. I am Anne-Lise Cailliez, and I can't wait to join you again next week. Thanks for listening to Parlez-Vous CEO today. If you enjoyed the show, leave a 5-star review. It helps us keep going. And connect with us on Instagram at Parlez-Vous CEO. I am Anne-Lise Cailliez, and I know some days are harder than others. On those tough days, think back to why you started. What you're doing today matters, even when you can't see the results yet. Ideas are great, but it's what you do with them that counts. Find everything we talked about today at parlezvousceo.com. See you next week, and you've got this.